last year, 396 students with lower than 3 A stars predicted actually got themselves an offer from Oxbridge and got accepted. So getting into Oxbridge is actually simpler than you think, and I'm going to go through the exact process that you have to go through as a year 12 or year 11 and what you need to be looking out for. I myself don't go to Oxbridge, I go to a medical school, but with my co-founder Shadman, over the past 2 years we've actually mentored 20 students to get into Oxbridge following a very simple system. And I'm going to outline the biggest chunks and the biggest parts of this system and how we were able to get actually 100% of our select cohort of 20 students an offer. Pretty much getting into it, the first thing you have to do is pick the right course. And we're actually taking on more students currently, and you'll be surprised how many people will get to year 13 with a few days until their application is due in October and they still don't know what course to pick. And I'll be honest with you, right? This is really difficult because the people who are applying to Cambridge and Oxford, they have known that they're going to go. They have known which course they're aiming for since year 11 or year 12, and they've been doing supercurriculars, they've been reading books, they've been reading essays, they've been doing research in that area. And those are the people who are actually going to get an offer because they have true passion towards that subject, and it's going to show in their interview and in their personal statement, right? So if you're in year 12 or year 11 right now, you have to spend some time right now picking a course and figuring out, like, where am I happy to do research and actually learn outside of curriculum on, and actually be able to talk about that in an interview. So a lot of people will go for medicine, right? Like, you have to have a real reason as to why you want to go for medicine, and you should ideally know that there's a particular sector of medicine that really interests you, right? Because that's going to really show through in your interviews. If, for example, you've always found immunology and like sort of viruses and things like that really fascinating, that might be useful. Many people might have a lot of knowledge around the musculoskeletal system, around how muscles work because they go to the gym or something like that, and you can apply that to an extent to medicine because there's lots of musculoskeletal diseases and things like that, right? But there has to be an area of the course that you're going for that you just have genuine passion towards researching and understanding more about, because it's just going to give you a massive boost. Okay, again, same thing for law or economics. For example, I had friends who were applying to economics at Oxbridge before, and again, we've mentored people, and these are people who are reading economics newspapers daily, right? They're researching the current economic affairs, thinking about what the best systems are. You have to be doing this on a daily basis. It has to be something that you're really interested in. And if you're going to apply to economics without being someone who's like this, you're going to get out-competed more likely than not, right? So make sure you pick the right course. And if you're not doing any of this, maybe all you do is, maybe you don't have any hobbies or anything that you're researching, you're interested in, then you have to scour the different courses available and pick one that you think you're actually going to an extent enjoy researching, right? And make sure that you have a look around the internet and see what might that entail. If you are to become an expert in that field, is that something that you'd be interested in, right? Really make sure you've picked the right course, otherwise you're going to struggle here, okay? Now, I want to go really in depth into study skills. Again, I said at the start that you can actually get in without 3A stars predicted. But there's no reason why you shouldn't aim for 3A stars predicted, okay? And what we like our students to be doing is to have the best study skills possible so that they can pretty much coast along on their A levels and still get 3A stars predicted and end up with 3A stars, and then spend the rest of their time becoming a subject expert, if that makes sense, in economics, in law, or wherever. So they can really just go deep into something like that. So study skills is probably something that you've never seen before, because this is just not talked about. This is Bloom's taxonomy. This is how universities will design their curriculums, and even schools and exam boards are going to be designing their curriculum. how this works is this is the levels of knowledge, right? And you can see the bottom of the pillar is sort of just remembering basic facts. So maybe you remember that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Next one is understanding concepts, right? So understanding a bit more in terms of like the logic of how things work. Applying it is where most people will get capped off. Applying that knowledge in an exam question, something like that, right? And this section is really important because if you're going into year 11 or year 12, if you're going into year 12, you've done your GCSEs and you're going to know some techniques that have worked well for you. Maybe you've got straight 8s, straight 9s, right? And you've got pretty good GCSE grades and you think, well, I'm quite good. Maybe I should be able to apply to Oxbridge, right? First of all, A-levels are a bit of a step up. So the amount of information coming towards you is going to be a lot more, and you're going to have to memorize a lot more if that's the technique that you're using. So you have to do a bit of an audit in terms of your current learning techniques, and more likely than not, I can tell you that your techniques are all on this bottom layer. Maybe you're doing exam questions, which is just testing yourself at the apply layer, so you're just applying the information over and over again until you get good at it. Maybe you're just doing flashcards, which is just these two bottom layers where you're just memorizing the information, right? And what's going to happen is when you get to a point where you're getting tested on being able to analyze or evaluate the knowledge that's given to you in your subjects, you're going to struggle. And the other thing is these are really inefficient if you're just over and over just spamming practice questions and flashcards, right? And you can, and I know many people who've got straight A stars with this method, but they have to work hours and hours, 6 hours a day for a year straight, right? Unless they're just naturally really intelligent. It's really inefficient. And the reason why I'm pushing you guys to move away from this is because if you're going to apply for Oxford or Cambridge or medicine or dentistry, these things are going to require a lot more than just being good at your A-levels. You're going to have effective time management so that you can spend time away from your A-levels on your personal statement, on your interview skills, on admissions exams, right? So it's really important that you learn the skills to actually utilize these layers. So when you're learning, when you're studying, you're practicing on these layers, evaluating, analyzing, creating. And you can actually see this again. First of all, universities will literally use this framework to create their curriculums. But you can even see this in the sense of how does knowledge peak, right? As you're going up the levels, when you're a younger student, the teachers are teaching you facts that you can learn. As you get higher and higher towards GCSEs, A levels, you can have to apply your knowledge a lot more in different situations. As you get towards analyzing and evaluating, right, you have to actually be able to, this means you have to judge how important is this information, critique it, things like that. So imagine scientists, right, they're going to be critiquing the information because that's their job. And then if you look at the top, creating new information, so sort of producing new work, producing original work. This is what you have to do in a PhD, right? You have to create something that has not been discovered yet. So obviously if you're at this level, most people won't be at this level, but if you are thinking at this level, you're going to do much better, right? And learning efficiently, pretty much all it comes down to is how well you think when you're learning, okay? So I can't go into the ins and outs of how to study completely effectively in this one video, but I can direct you to some different videos. And particularly what I'm wary of is many of you who are aiming for Oxbridge have stuck to this thing called active recall and spaced repetition, right? And you're doing that, or maybe you're doing loads of practice questions, right? And this is how you did well in your GCSEs, or maybe how you've done well in school overall. And I want to push you away from this. Reason being is this becomes exponentially inefficient in terms of how well you study, right? And we have to be really effective with our time if we're going to aim for these top universities, because you want to be able to put time towards interviews, put time towards admissions exams and other things, right? So I'll link a video in the description that will hopefully change your mind on active recall and spaced repetition. If you're someone who's doing it all the time, definitely watch that video. It's like an hour long, but it's really, really good, and it'll pretty much change your entire perspective. And if you haven't, even if you've never even heard of this, and maybe your current techniques for studying is just like rereading a textbook and highlighting information or writing out notes, then you're in a different situation as well, because that is probably the most inefficient form of studying. This is slightly more efficient, right? Now, if you need a quick boost, then you can actually move towards this, right? So using flashcards and just doing loads of practice questions. That's what this basically is. Using Anki or Quizlet, if you've ever heard of those, and doing loads of practice questions. And if you start doing this, you will get a bit of a boost in terms of your exam outcomes, right? But you really want to start moving towards a learning system that is going to push you towards the top of this pyramid, which is create, evaluate, and analyze, right? And you're going to have to do mind maps. You're going to have to be looking at the different relationships of how different concepts fit together, and really thinking about your entire subject, for example, biology, in the sense of an actual scientist, right? Thinking about how do all of these things come together, why are these important, why am I even learning this, right? So watch that video. I've got some other videos on the channel that explain this as well, but push towards this. And if you're looking to join our mentorship, maybe you're a year 11, you're a year 12 student, I'll put the link in the description to book a call with us, but we have a full course that teaches you how to study really effectively. Okay, so pick the right course, have the right study skills. These are really fundamentals. These are your base layer of getting into Oxbridge. The next thing is supercurriculars, and this is really underutilized by many people. If you're in year 12 or year 11, you want to start looking at what things can I do for supercurriculars to actually make my statement stand out, and things I can talk about in the interview, right? So that's work experience. If you're doing medicine, you obviously need work experience, but you can even do different sort of like essay competitions, Olympiads. They can be useful, but the more you've read around the topic and potentially just done things outside of it, so written essays, written articles, that's going to be really, really useful. It will be case by case. It really depends on what course you're going for. This does help if you know someone who's in your course. Let's say you're aiming for economics. If you know someone at Cambridge who's doing economics, it's really useful to ask them what they did and try and mimic and copy their supercurricular pattern. Again, this is why we think mentors are so useful. Is if you're paired with someone, they can tell you exactly what supercurriculars to do. That will give you a good statement, and then exactly how they'll prepare you in terms of how to actually speak about those in your interviews. Okay, definitely don't leave this. If you're in year 12, you should start looking at this now, along with making sure you've got both of these pillars. Personal statement. This is usually written after your supercurriculars are done, or at least you've planned them, right? So you have an idea of, I'm going to do these 5 supercurricular activities I'm going to talk about in my personal statement, and maybe you might have an idea of what might happen from them, and you can actually start drafting your personal statement in year 12. But you can really leave this more so towards the summer. What has to start soon is I would definitely start this interview preparation as soon as you can, and it doesn't have to be like one-on-one with a professional, but you need to start building the confidence to perform well in an interview, particularly if you're not naturally extroverted. And even if you are extroverted, it's very difficult, and people have never been taught the skills to do well in an interview. And you probably won't do an interview as a student until you're aiming for job interviews or aiming for Oxbridge interviews, right? And what do I mean by this? So there's things that in terms of interviews, there's 2 things. So it's how you present yourself and how you speak, so how confident you sound, and the other thing is just knowledge, right? So how confident, comfortable, these are soft skills that not only are going to actually help you in this, but they're going to help you in life in general. So it's always good to practice these. And knowledge is the other thing, is researching outside, so being able to talk about the topic that you're interested in. I'm going to give you a basic framework of how to start practicing interviews yourself. If you're quite young, year 11, year 12, and definitely start this as soon as you can, right? And in an ideal scenario, again, you'll have a mentor. So with our students, we pair them with a mentor, and we'll start this type of preparation very early on. And this is where almost the majority of the students will fail, right? Because if you get invited to an interview and you perform exceptionally well at an interview, the admissions officers are almost definitely going to invite you and give you an offer, because it's the final hurdle, right? And they invite quite a lot of people to interviews. So you don't want to fail at this stage, okay? So what you can do yourself is something like this, like you have your phone and you record yourself speaking, okay? So you can actually speak about anything. So very few people are sort of record themselves and post to social media, right? But you'll notice that if you do that, if you're posting yourself and you're recording yourself, your soft skills are going to improve. You're going to be able to articulate yourself a lot better, and you're going to be a lot calmer in a situation like this, right? But you don't have to post it. What you can do is just continuously record yourself, try and reach like an hour limit. Let's say you want to have 100 hours of recordings of yourself, just speaking about whatever it is, and that volume is going to really improve your ability to articulate things, okay? If you've ever heard of this story of the clay pottery class, right? It's a sort of like it's an allegory, right? So there is two groups that are in a pottery class. One group is instructed to make as many clay pots as possible, and the other one is instructed to just make one and to make it as good as possible, right? And what will you find is after 3 months or so, the group that has made hundreds and hundreds of pots with no sort of emphasis on how good the pot is, what actually happens is they're the ones that produce the best pots, whereas the ones who are just focusing on building one pot and making it as good as possible, they produce really poor clay pots, right? And the idea here is volume, okay? If you just get hours and hours and hours of you speaking, the volume there, you're going to naturally improve. And how you supercharge that is you watch back your recordings and you see, what mistakes am I making? Like, am I speaking too fast? Do I look nervous? Like, what things are making me look nervous? And you can really work on all of that, okay? That's why I said have like a target in terms of, I want to have 100 hours of recordings of me. You're going to get really comfortable in front of a camera, but you're also going to get really comfortable in terms of just speaking to people, okay? Now, it's not as good as having someone in front of you, right? Another thing that really helps, this is really stretching it, because I doubt anyone's going to go and do this, but if you've ever had like a sales job where you're even online, you're on a call with a prospect and you're speaking to a completely random person, you have to obviously, it's almost like an interview. But if you do have a sales job, what you'll notice is, again, your interview skills are really, really going to improve, because you're just constantly, day after day, you're speaking to random people and you're trying to be confident, you're trying to present them something, you're trying to sell them on something, right? So if anyone wants to go out of and really like try their best, go get yourself like a remote sales job, or maybe even work for free, and just use that as practice for interviews. That really helps as well. It's not something you need to do, but definitely recording yourself is going to be a big one, or if you have friends and family that you can get them to ask you interview questions as well, and recording that, very, very big, very useful. Or just get yourself a mentor, right? And the other thing is knowledge. So if you're able to, again, when you're speaking and recording yourself, do it about like talking about the actual topic, right? So again, I'm trying to think of a different course. Let's say you're doing engineering, right? Go and research things about engineering, that's happening currently, and record yourself talking about that. And like, just genuinely imagine someone who has recorded themselves for 100 hours over 2 years, for example, talking about their topic of engineering. Think about how much better that person is going to perform at an interview than someone who just prepared for 1 month in October of year 13 to try and get towards this interview, right? It's volume, and at the end of the day, if you put in this amount of volume, it's unreasonable for you to not get in. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. The final thing I was going to say is admissions exam. So your Oxbridge course is more than likely going to have an admissions exam. This is pretty much down to, again, study skills. You need to know how to prepare well for this. Again, if you can, start earlier than everyone else on this, and you're just going to outperform them. Do the volume of practice questions, and also, again, I was mentioning study skills. You have to be efficient with this as well. But there's things, I think it's called, you've got the ESAT, you've got the LNAT, you've got the UCAT. There's so many different admissions exams. Whichever one you're aiming for, make sure you're aware of it, and just start looking at it, getting a gist of how to potentially do well in this. The earlier you start, the better. And if you're able to get to a position where your study skills are efficient enough that you can really spend a few hours a week on your A-levels, and you're actually performing exceptionally well, and all of the rest of the time can be put towards admissions exams and interviews, you've sort of hit the money at that point, right? That's what you want to be. That's the position you want to be. That's how Oxbridge works. Hopefully that makes sense. What you want to look at in terms of how do you actually get in, what really matters the most is these 3 things, right? Like I mentioned earlier, you can get in with lower than 3 A stars predicted, and the reason being is because what Oxbridge really looks at is these 3 things. The admissions exam score, again, if you're scoring top 10%-ish, like they're definitely going to invite you to an interview, and if you've got the interview skills, you're definitely going to get in. So these are the super important parts. Having a personal statement, a good personal statement, really helps, and that's something that you can, it's not very stressful, right? You write one, you have someone look at it, your school teachers can look at it. If your school doesn't send many people to Oxford or Cambridge every year, you definitely want someone a bit more professional to look at it. So again, find someone online. You can always book a call with us and get one of our mentorship programs and get us to look at it. But the real, like the 80-20 of everything here is these 2 things, and you should really focus your time on this. Don't leave this to the last minute like everyone else does, because if you put your volume in here, you're going to outcompete everyone else. All right. Hopefully that was useful. Again, like I mentioned, if you are in year 12 or year 11 or even earlier and you want to sort of get ahead of everything here, and you know you want to go to Oxbridge, definitely book a call using the link below, and we're happy to look at whether you'll be applicable for our mentorship. And if you are, we basically pair you with a mentor who's at Oxbridge or studied there already for the particular course you're aiming for, and they'll use everything I've mentioned here, build out a roadmap. They'll mentor and coach you the whole way through. Imagine running a marathon without a coach compared to with a coach.